Welcome back. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a like. Enjoy the video. What occurs when a prominent CEO goes undercover and encounters discrimination in his own store? It was Saturday morning just after 10 a.m. when Terrence Hall adjusted the brim of his baseball cap in the rearview mirror. The person looking back at him was hardly recognizable. Not the CEO who had created a multi-million-dollar retail empire, but just another face in the crowd. His simple hoodie and jeans were a stark contrast to the tailored suits that typically characterized his days. This day wasn't about boardrooms or figures. It was about entering his own world unannounced to see how it appeared through the eyes of a stranger.
Terrence had always believed in the power of connection. His company was founded on the principle that every customer mattered, regardless of their background. However, recently, murmurs of complaints had begun to surface. Reports of inadequate service, bias, and a lack of concern from his staff. If there was any truth to these allegations, he needed to find out, not as the boss, but as someone experiencing it firsthand. The retail store in question was located just outside Dallas, Texas, in a bustling suburban plaza. It wasn't the flagship location, nor was it the highest performing store in his chain. But this site held special meaning. It was the first store Terrence had established outside his home state, a risk that had yielded significant rewards. He had visited numerous times during its early days, but now, years later, he couldn't help but wonder if the warmth and inclusivity he had envisioned remained intact. Terrence parked his car and took a deep breath. A mix of anticipation and unease washed over him. He was about to step into the unknown, shedding the safety net of his title to determine whether his values still mattered at the core of his business. The truth, no matter how uncomfortable, was something he owed to himself and to every individual who entered those doors. But what Terrence didn't realize was that his dedication to uncovering the truth would lead him to an unforgettable moment, one that would challenge everything he believed about his own business. Terrence exited his car and entered the busy parking lot. The sun was already high, casting bright reflections off the windshields of nearby vehicles. He adjusted the strap of his worn canvas bag, resembling something an everyday shopper might carry. Today he wasn't CEO Terrence Hall. He was merely another customer, with a name that nobody needed to know. The storefront shined in the sunlight, the logo bold and recognizable. He couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as he approached the automatic doors. This was his creation, a vision brought to life. But pride quickly shifted to focus as he crossed the threshold, the cool rush of air conditioning greeting him inside. The store buzzed with activity. Shoppers pushed carts filled with items, and children's voices danced with excitement near the toy aisle. Employees in uniforms moved purposefully, stocking shelves, processing purchases, and assisting customers. To an untrained observer, everything appeared to function seamlessly. But Terrence wasn't there to merely skim the surface. He was there to investigate more deeply. He paused near a display of vividly colored kitchen appliances, taking in his surroundings. Haley, a young woman in a striped uniform jacket, stood close by, conversing with a customer about product details. The stock associate rearranged items on a nearby shelf, his motions efficient, yet detached. And there, at the far end of the store, was a younger man leaning against the electronics counter, idly scrolling on his phone. Terrence decided to move in that direction. He strolled through the aisles, consciously matching the pace of a casual shopper. He picked up a pair of headphones, examining them as if contemplating a purchase. It was a test, simple yet revealing. Would this employee approach him, offer assistance, a smile, anything? But nothing came. The young man hardly glanced up from his phone, let alone acknowledged his presence. Terrence waited, giving the employee every chance to engage. Still nothing. He felt a growing knot of discomfort in his stomach, but he wasn't prepared to jump to conclusions just yet. Perhaps the employee was preoccupied. Maybe he simply hadn't noticed. Terrence moved on, scanning the aisles and observing interactions. He spotted an older woman seeking help in the home goods section. She looked frustrated, glancing around for assistance. Before Terrence could intervene, a second employee approached her, cheerful and attentive. Relief washed over her face as they began to chat. The contrast to his own experience was striking. However, as Terrence turned back toward the electronics counter, determined to give the young man another chance, what happened next would reveal that this was not merely a one-time oversight.
It was indicative of a much larger issue. Terrence returned to the electronics counter, this time holding a boxed set of Bluetooth speakers. He placed the box on the counter gently, an action that should naturally attract someone's attention. The young employee finally looked up, his expression blank and uninterested. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone making it clear that he wasn't particularly inclined to assist. Terrence smiled, trying to lighten the awkward atmosphere. "Yeah, I was hoping you could tell me a bit more about these. Are they suitable for outdoor use?" The employee glanced at the box briefly before shrugging. "I don't know. Probably," he said, his attention drifting back to his phone. Terrence blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Could you perhaps check? I want to be certain before I buy them." The employee sighed heavily, as if Terrence's request was a significant bother. Without a word, he grabbed the box and flipped it over, scanning the back. "It says here they're weatherproof," he mumbled, handing it back without further elaboration. Terrence felt a surge of frustration but kept his voice steady. "Okay. And do you know if they're compatible with most devices?" The employee rolled his eyes. "Lift time. Look, man, all the details are right here on the box. You can read it yourself." He waved dismissively toward the shelf. "Or choose something else. Doesn't matter to me." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant hum of the store. Terrence felt the tension seep into his own posture. This wasn't simply inattentiveness. It was blatant disregard. He glanced around, noticing other customers receiving warm and enthusiastic service from employees. A white couple near the front was getting personalized assistance from the same young man who had helped the older woman earlier. Yet here he was, barely acknowledged. Determined to stay composed, Terrence chose to probe further. "You seem busy," he said, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Is there someone else who might be able to help?" The employee smirked, the corners of his mouth curling with disdain. "I don't think anyone's free right now. Just figure it out, all right?" The words stung more than Terrence anticipated. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was disappointed. This wasn't simply a bad attitude. It was something deeper, something more troubling, and it wasn't just about him. If this was how the employee treated someone he presumed was an ordinary shopper, how many others had left this store feeling the same sting of indifference? Before he could say another word, the young man turned away, grabbing his phone and walking toward the back of the store. Terrence stood there, rooted in place, holding the box of speakers. For a moment he considered leaving, but quickly dismissed the thought. He wasn't finished yet. However, what Terrence didn't recognize was that this moment of dismissal would soon uncover something far more concerning about the culture he thought he had established. Terrence placed the speakers back on the shelf, his mind racing with thoughts. The encounter was not just unprofessional, it felt personal. He decided to continue exploring the store, observing how other employees interacted with customers. If this single experience was an anomaly, he needed to confirm it. If it wasn't, he faced a more significant issue. He wandered into the clothing section, where a young Latina employee was folding shirts at a display. She greeted him warmly, her smile genuine. "Let me know if you need help with anything," she said. It was a sharp contrast to the cold reception he had just received. Terrence lingered, pretending to browse, and noticed her assisting an elderly man nearby. She was patient and attentive, helping him find the right size and even suggesting a matching tie. The man's appreciation was clear, and the interaction left Terrence feeling a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the store wasn't entirely off course, but as he moved toward the home goods section, a conversation caught his attention. Two employees, both young and casually lounging against a shelf, were engaged in a quiet but unmistakably disrespectful exchange. "That guy over there," one of them said, subtly gesturing in Terrence's direction, "is probably just here to browse. People like him never buy anything significant." Terrence felt his jaw tighten as he pretended to examine a set of pots and pans. The other employee laughed. "Yeah, he doesn't look like he's got the cash for this stuff. Probably just wasting time." It was a punch to the gut. They had no idea who he was. To them, he was just another black man wandering around a store. They assumed he couldn't afford it. The casual nature of their conversation, the ease with which they dismissed him, conveyed so much. It wasn't merely a single unprofessional employee. It was a culture that had somehow allowed these attitudes to persist. He stayed silent, fighting the urge to confront them right then and there. Instead, he moved toward the checkout area, determined to gather as much insight as possible before addressing the issue. At the register, he found a middle-aged black woman ringing up customers with a kind, professional demeanor. Her name tag read Denise, Terrence observed as she greeted each person with a smile, her voice steady and warm. When it was his turn, she looked up and smiled.
"Did you find everything okay?"
"Not exactly," Terrence replied, his tone measured. "But I think I'll hold off for now." Denise's smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Well, if you need anything, just let us know. We're here to help."
Her sincerity was heartfelt, and for a moment it eased the weight on Terrence's chest. It was evident that not everyone in this store shared the same dismissive attitude. But it also highlighted the inconsistency. Why were some employees so welcoming, while others were so openly biased? As Terrence exited the store, he couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play, and he knew it was time to confront the truth directly. Terrence sat in his car, the afternoon heat pressing against the windows. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, staring at the store that bore his company's logo. It felt surreal. This business, his pride and joy, was intended to embody opportunity, fairness, and respect. Yet the experiences he just had presented a different picture. One he wasn't ready for but couldn't overlook. The dismissive behavior from the electronics employee lingered in his mind. But it was the casual comments he overheard in the home goods section that hurt the most. These weren't isolated events. They pointed to a deeper issue within his company culture, one that had gone unaddressed. He recalled the early days of the business, when he personally trained every manager and hired staff based on shared values. Back then, he'd stressed the importance of treating every customer like family, regardless of who they were or how much they spent. But as the company expanded, those personal touches became increasingly difficult to maintain. Delegation was essential, but had it come at the price of the values he'd worked tirelessly to instill? Terrence couldn't help but question if he had become too disconnected from the day-to-day operations. Success had fostered growth, but it had also created blind spots. Were managers nurturing a culture of respect? Or were they ignoring subtle prejudices and unprofessional behavior? Had he failed to equip his employees with the tools to combat bias and treat everyone fairly? He took a deep breath, his mind replaying the interactions from earlier. Denise, the kind cashier, had served as a reminder of what his business should embody. Yet employees like her were being overshadowed by those who did not share her values. It wasn't just about customer experience. It was about the culture he had allowed to flourish. Terrence reached for his notebook, always kept in the glove compartment, and jotted down his thoughts. This wasn't merely about rectifying one store. It was about ensuring that every employee in every location understood the importance of representing his brand. It was about accountability from the top down. But before he could rebuild, Terrence knew there was one more step to take, a step that would reveal how deep the problem ran and challenge those at its core. Terrence walked back into the store with quiet determination. He wasn't there to create a scene or publicly shame anyone. This wasn't about ego. It was about addressing a culture that had gone off course. He approached the customer service desk and requested to speak with the store manager. After a short wait, a man in his late 40s came forward. His name tag read Brian, and his demeanor was professional yet slightly hesitant. "How can I help you today?" he asked. Terrence extended a hand. "Terrence Hall," he said, noting Brian's eyes widen in recognition. "I'm the owner of this store." The manager's composure momentarily faltered before he recovered. "Mr. Hall, it's an honor to meet you. If I had known you were visiting." Terrence raised a hand to interrupt him. "That's the point, Brian. You weren't supposed to know. I came here as a regular customer to see how things are really operating, and what I observed today was not good." Brian's face flushed slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Can you share what happened?" Terrence recounted the day's events. The indifference from the electronics employee, the overheard remarks, and the glaring inconsistencies in customer treatment. He spoke calmly, but firmly, his words carrying the weight of disappointment. "This isn't just about one problematic employee," he stated. "It's about a culture that permits this kind of behavior to persist. I've built this company on the notion that every customer deserves respect, no matter who they are. Today I witnessed the opposite." Brian shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't aware of these issues. I've always tried to ensure our team upholds the company's values." Terrence nodded. "I believe you, but something is clearly slipping through the cracks. And it's not just your responsibility,
it's mine as well. Somewhere along the way, I've allowed the values I established this company on to become diluted. That ends today.
He requested Brian to gather the staff for an impromptu meeting in the break room.
Within minutes, the employees were assembled, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Terrence stood before them, no longer just another customer, but the leader they didn't expect to see. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady. "For those who don't know me, my name is Terrence Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of this company, and today I came here undercover to see how things are operating on the ground."
The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling in.
Terrence took a moment to look at each face before continuing. "What I saw today was concerning. Some of you demonstrated kindness and professionalism, the kind of behavior this company was founded on. But others failed to meet even the most basic standard of respect. And that failure isn't solely on you. It's on me for not ensuring our culture remains consistent."
He turned toward the young electronics employee, who now appeared pale and anxious. "You dismissed me, ignored me, and made it clear I wasn't worth your time. That's unacceptable. But even worse, I overheard 2 employees discussing me, making assumptions about who I am and what I could afford based solely on a glance." The tension in the room was palpable, but Terrence maintained a measured tone.
"I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here to rectify this, because if we don't treat every customer with respect, we fail, and I refuse to allow this company to fail." As he stood there, observing their expressions shift from shock to reflection, Terrence understood this was merely the beginning of the changes he needed to implement. Terrence paused, letting the room settle into silence. The significance of his words had landed, and now came the part that mattered most: action. He recognized that highlighting the problems wasn't sufficient. He needed to lead the way toward solutions. "Here's what's going to happen," he continued, his voice calm yet resolute. "This isn't about punishment or blaming anyone. It's about accountability and growth. Each one of us, myself included, has a duty to uphold the values this company was built upon. Starting today, we're implementing changes." He looked at Brian, the store manager, first. "We're going to roll out mandatory training on bias and customer service, not just here, but across all stores. It's not enough to presume people know how to treat others. We need to teach it, reinforce it, and hold everyone accountable." Brian nodded, his expression a blend of relief and determination. "Understood, Mr. Hall. I will ensure it happens." Terrence addressed the group again. "Second, I will be visiting more stores in person, without prior notice. This isn't about catching anyone off guard. It's about maintaining connections. I need to see firsthand what's happening at ground level." The employees exchanged worried glances, but there was a sense of understanding in the room. Terrence noticed that some of them, especially Denise, were nodding subtly in agreement. "Lastly," Terrence stated, his tone softening, "I want to hear from all of you. What's working? What's not? If there are issues with leadership or policies, I need to know. My door is open. More importantly, I will ensure you have a way to voice concerns anonymously if you're uncomfortable approaching me directly." The employees seemed to relax somewhat, and Terrence took that as a sign to conclude on a heartfelt note. "I started this company to create something different, something better. A place where everyone, regardless of who they are, feels valued. Somewhere along the way we've lost some of that. But I'm not abandoning it. I know we can do better, and I'm counting on all of you to help make that happen." As the meeting concluded, Terrence approached Denise, the cashier, who had exhibited professionalism and kindness. "Thank you for being a bright spot today," he said, offering a sincere smile. "Your attitude reminds me why I established this business."
Denise smiled back, her voice steady.
"Thank you, Mr. Hall. I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated." Exiting the store for the second time that day, Terrence felt a blend of exhaustion and hope. The journey ahead wouldn't be simple, but it was necessary. He had received a wake-up call, and now it was up to him to take action. As he drove away, Terrence felt a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that sometimes confronting hard truths was the only way to move forward, and that every step toward change began with someone willing to take the first. Here on Karma's Twists, we share the most impactful stories of karma and justice that the world needs to see. Don't miss a single moment of good triumphing over evil. Join our community and subscribe. Be part of the movement that believes justice always wins.